Hello there and welcome to Newspeak. Good to see you again. I hope that you've had a good week. I'm joined, as usual, by our, very dapperly dressed senior fellow, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, also Amy Gallagher of Stand Up to Woke, and our other senior fellow, Dr. Philip Kiszely, cultural historian. Now, before we go on, we've got some announcements and everything to make, but before we get to that, congratulations are in order for our senior fellow, Rafe. Rafe, you're not dressed like that because of what happened this week, but you were awarded a prestigious medal, weren't you?
Yeah, I was very honoured to receive the King's Coronation Medal for my work in broadcasting and education, essentially, and just around the coronation, but also explaining to the peoples of the Commonwealth and the Commonwealth realms in particular the role and value of the Crown constitutionally and so forth, and all our institutions more broadly, and why we should take pride in them. So that was a rather nice, unexpected.
Yes, congratulations!
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. Now, to locals, we've got a few local events.
Yes, so we've started the year with a great series of events in January, and we're carrying on in February across the country with our NCF Locals group. So if you do live near any of these towns or cities, please do email us to attend. We're going to be in Sheffield on the 4th of February. On the 5th of February, we're going to be in Edinburgh. February the 13th will see us in Lincoln, where we have a speaker event with Sean Matthews of the Reform Party. On the 16th of February, there'll be a Norwich group event. 17th of February, we'll be in Reading. February the 19th, Harrison Pitt, our fellow and host of the programme, will be in Brighton. On the 20th of February, David Starkey, dear friend of ours, will be in Beaconsfield speaking. And on the 22nd of February at 12 noon, there's a lunch in London. So if you're near any of those events, do come. They're all free of charge, except for the lunch in London, I imagine. And just email locals@newcultureforum.org.uk, locals@newcultureforum.org.uk.
Thank you very much, Rafe. As you might have noticed from this introduction, what we have to announce now seems to be getting longer and longer, not just with locals, but obviously with our new programs. And also we have two very important events coming up this year. Put them in your calendar. Obviously the details won't go out for quite a long way, but we've got our first locals conference down in Salisbury, which is on March 29th, Saturday, March 29th. And it's all going to be about the Magna Carta and the making of the English. And then in May, we have our very first literary festival. This is really something, actually, because, literary festivals happen all over the country. They're all terribly woke now, but this one won't be. Philip, you are the man in charge of that.
I'm the man in charge of it, and I'm very excited about it. This is going to be on the 23rd and 24th of May. Right. Details will come out. We've already got some utterly amazing speakers, and we're planning to do different kinds of things. It won't just be speeches. There'll be interviews, panels, and all sorts of different kinds of things. So do keep an eye out for that. We'll be publicising it quite soon, I think, because we're pretty much there now. Yeah. And then tickets will be available again over the coming weeks. So it's one to watch, and I think it's just going to be brilliant.
And it's May the
23rd. It's the evening of Friday, May the 23rd, and all Saturday, May the 24th. So it's a 2-day event. It's down here in London, and we'll give details as and when.
Thanks very much. A lot of dates for your calendar. Back to business. Rafe, we are going to have a population, so they say, of 72 million within 5 years' time.
Well, yes, so this comes just as we've had to announce that Britain has now overtaken France in terms of the size of its population, which is a great milestone. We're actually forecast to overtake Germany eventually to become the most populous country in Europe, despite having a far smaller landmass. We've now had new projections out showing that by 2032, the population will increase by another 5 million to 72.5 million, up from the 67.6 million allegedly. We assume it's much larger than that, actually. And virtually all of that growth has been due to immigration, because the normal factors of deaths and births are essentially cancelling each other out. So we as a population are flatlining population-wise. And so all of this has been fueled by immigration. The forecasts again project that from the late 2028 onwards, net migration is going to fall to 340,000. But as Alp Mehmet, our friend from Migration Watch, said, that's highly unlikely because, of course, you need to have real policy changes to bring things down to that level. So this projection of 5 million by 2032, I think, is a severe underestimate. I think it's going to be far, far larger than that, perhaps even 10 million rather than 5 million. And, of course, we're also, in terms of 340,000, that's still net migration because we still have large numbers of people fleeing the country. And, in fact, there's only increased with the election of Labour and all of the, draconian tax policies and everything else. So we're seeing an exodus, a white flight, a brain drain from this country at the same time that we're importing people. And as we've all seen, you've had some people in the media and on the left coming out in the last couple of days saying, "Oh, this is going to increase our tax pool. This is wonderful for us." Whereas, of course, as we've exposed on this channel, actually, the types of immigrants we're bringing in are low-skilled migrants. They are a net drain on the economy from the moment they set foot upon England's green and pleasant land, and by the time they reach pension age, each one costs £151,000 per person. If they get to the age of 80, they cost £460,000, and we're simply importing more and more of this. And it's something, of course, which the Tories have failed on, Labour has failed on. Even Reform have promised this net zero, which is one in, one out, which still doesn't address the problem. At least Robert Jenrick, when he was trying to become leader, he wanted Parliament to set a legally binding cap. And that's the sort of thing we need to have, along with a moratorium, actually, on all immigration, I would say.
Yeah, and of course, we actually don't know how many people are in the country. We've really got no idea. I mean, for example, we're in London now. 1 in 12 people in London is an illegal immigrant. That's just an extraordinary figure, and it shocked even me. But we're talking about statistics. Some of these statistics that we are talking about, they're shocking, but my God, they probably don't mean anything because we really don't know. I mean, you throw into the equation another statistic as well, which is 9 million people in this country are economically inactive at the moment. We've got an aging population, and so we are just heading for financial and cultural, of course, catastrophe. So all of this stuff is incredibly frightening, and you think that if we throw these statistics at people, then people will wake up. But by the same token, we know that the other side, people don't care about statistics. They care about romantic narratives. And you have to think, when are we going to get to a position when people are going to sensibly and honestly say, we really need to do something about this? The Labour Party, the government are saying, oh, well, immigration's out of control. We really need to do something about it. But they will do what the Conservative Party had done for the last 14 years and just increase and increase and increase. That's the way that things happen. And ultimately, it lessens people's faith and belief in democracy.
I think some things seem to be changing in certain cliches that are used at times like this. So, for example, most people seem to be saying it is entirely down to migration, whereas before they would say, oh, but children of migrants are born here. You don't actually hear that so much anymore. Amy, one thing that bothers me, I don't know whether, do you think I'm being too sensitive? When people talk about the population explosion, it feels organic. Do you know what I mean? It feels like it's naturally exploded. It's not. It's something that's being imposed from outside.
Yeah, this is all a choice. It didn't have to be that way. And these are, of course, projections, so it could still be stopped. We could start to lower immigration now, and we would be able to lower the population. But there's no sign of that. Apart, you see the odd people like Robert Jenrick and Rupert Lowe talking about this, but not in the Tory government or Labour, really. I'm frustrated by this because even when you see right-wing outlets, conservative outlets like GB News or Talk TV, they still focus on the economic side of it. So they will say things like, well, 70% are here on work visas, so what about this other 30%? Or should we cut down on students, or should we cut down on dependents? If someone comes in for low-skilled immigration, should we try to cut down on that? If they come in to help the NHS but they bring lots of dependents, will that overall mean that GDP goes down? The emphasis is still on GDP and the economy, and these people coming in aren't just ordinary workers. It's not like we're all just interchangeable workers.
No.
The impact that this will have will be, on culture, on our religious, cultural and ethnic identity is going to change dramatically. And that's the thing that I care about. I don't care if I'm a little bit poorer, but I do care if my country completely changes, in terms of the way it looks and the way it feels and the culture entirely. I don't want to, have an influx of people who have total beliefs that are totally different to mine. And, things like crime and so on, these are the things that people still are not talking about. It always comes back to, do we need carers or not? And how will we care for our elderly? And, but all these other considerations to me are far more important to the future of the country.
And that's why, as I said, it's important not to use net migration figures, to use the gross migration figures, because that really tells you the type of demographic shift that we're having, because we are not interchangeable units just for the economy. As you say, this is about culture. And from the old mill towns of the north to London, towns and cities our viewers know too well have changed beyond all recognition. And by 2046, by Migration Watch's estimates, we're going to have to build 15 new Birminghams. Let that sink in. That's the sort of cultural change that we're getting. That's all going to be fueled by migration. Now, imagine Britain with 15 more cities the size of Birmingham, all of the people who've come here recently from abroad. That's fundamental change to the structure and the nature of our peoples and the character of the country.
Actually, someone also characterised it as being a completely new second London. In terms of numbers, I know a lot of people will be horrified at the prospect of that because of what it sort of represents. I have to return to this. You mentioned the response to it with reform. People are pinning their hopes on reform, I think. But what is the policy? You mentioned it there, Rafe. One in, one out, net zero, totally inadequate. Honestly, we're blue in the face saying this, but, net zero means 400,000 out, 400,000 in, you've got net zero. But I mean, what does that change? And all it does is change the country entirely. Why aren't they more radical? Why, I saw Nigel Farage speaking yesterday, I think it was in Parliament actually, and he was talking about the infrastructure and how we can't build houses without infrastructure. And I sort of thought, look, wait a minute, I don't want any more infrastructure or houses if this is the reason we have to get it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. I find just discussions about housing or the NHS or schools or anything, I get very frustrated when this massive topic of immigration is left out or it's just a side issue, because this affects everything. So, I don't really care if 200,000 more homes are built when we've got this extreme, population change. Who are those houses going to go to anyway? And are they going to be anywhere near enough? Probably not. So, to me, everything comes back to this issue.
Yeah. Everything does come back to immigration. And if you want to talk about net change, you just look at places like Batley and Dewsbury. There's net change for you. It's one demographic completely leaving because it's impossible for them to live there with a culture that is essentially colonized and taken over. And I know because I live quite near to these places, and it's quite shocking how this change, this transformation has taken place. And it's taken place over time. But of course, as Rafe says, when we're getting several more cities populated probably almost completely by immigrants, then this cultural shift will be so profound, there is just no coming back from it.
It's interesting, actually, on a sort of related issue. I was in Devon recently, and the population of Devon is surging. Why? It's because of the indigenous British population are retreating to these enclaves. And so you're getting this fact that this United Kingdom is becoming the United Nations with ethnic nationalist silos existing all around the country. It's a fascinating phenomenon to witness.
Yes, it is. Internal migration is really a thing now. Apparently around London, there are various different spots and market towns around London which have seen a huge increase in the white population. Yeah.
Well, and you've left London as well.
It's the same. Perfect.
Well, this is going to affect London more than anywhere, I think. I mean, it's going to affect England more than Scotland, Ireland and Wales, but it will be London's, our cultural capital, that is going to be absolute. I mean, it already has, dramatically changed. But in 5 years' time, I can't imagine what it's going to be like. And I know so many people are having discussions about leaving London. That seems to be on everybody's mind.
It seems we're divided by cultural practices as well, and very popular cultural practices. So you can walk down the streets in some of these small towns, mill towns particularly, where you will not see a white face, for example, until you go into a pub, and that's where all the white faces are, and you won't see any brown faces. So this division is, I think, really dangerous. You can't live in a country where you have a particular population or demographic doing this, you have a particular popular demographic doing that, and never the twain shall meet. That is dangerous. That should not be happening, but that is where we are now, and there will be more of it in the future.
Of course, if you were to go by a Home Office report, all this talk is very extremist, and terribly dangerous, because there was a report that was rejected. It has been rejected by the government, but it was essentially, Philip, was it not, about redefining extremism, and also, for that matter, reintroducing these non-crime hate incidents.
Yeah. So this was a report that was leaked, actually, wasn't it? And so it was.
Was it actually leaked?
Yeah, it was leaked, I think, and it was taking away the emphasis, deprioritizing ideology, and emphasizing behaviors. So, in other words, removing cause and just focusing on effect. That's going to be good. That's going to work, isn't it? It was specifically, it's about moving the emphasis away from Islam and Islamism. And there's this phrase, isn't there, which I think is called mixed ideologies on the back of the Southport thing. We need to focus on mixed ideologies. We need to focus on boys in their bedrooms. This, in the face of a shocking statistic, which is since 1999, 94% of terrorist deaths are Islamism related. They're all from that one ideology, and yet the government, and particularly the civil service in the Home Office, are pushing away from this. And we have an Home Office that has an Islam, I can't remember what it's called now, an Islamic network, I think it's called. That's right, isn't it? Of 700 people in the Home Office.
This is Connor's stuff.
This is Connor
talking about it.
And so they are looking at and targeting people like William Shawcross, for example, who did the report on Prevent and published this report saying that Prevent don't want to deal with Islamist terrorism. They're terrified of being called racist or Islamophobic. They're focusing on the tiny percentage of so-called far right threats. Okay, and these people in the Home Office are saying, "Oh well, William Shawcross, he would call these people woke. He would call." So they are discrediting the person who is calling this stuff out. It's very, very frightening. There's a fifth column essentially in the Home Office, and nobody's doing anything about it.
Also, apparently, talking about two-tier policing is now considered to be extreme right-wing.
Yeah. They wanted to expand the definition of extremism, and supposedly that would have been it, wouldn't it? To expand the definition of what far right means. Of course, it wouldn't have been what Islamism means, or something along those lines.
And alleged grooming gangs.
They said alleged grooming. I mean, that was so shocking. Of course, they're not alleged.
Even though these are after prosecution, you still have to use the word alleged. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the thing is, you see about this, is that this was, as I said, the recommendations were rejected. But in a way, that's sort of not the point, really. The point is it's exposed, as you say, exactly who we're dealing with. And then people will look and say, well, actually, why can't we deal with this and why can't we deal with that? Immigration, this and the other thing. It's becoming quite clear, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, Philip's quite correct to call it a fifth column, because that's precisely what it is. Now, a fifth column is, the definition as a group of people who are at war with the nation. And that's actually how we need to see this, because, our civil service is infested with this nonsense. For example, and the Home Office is actually at the center of all of this. Britain has the highest level of acceptance rates for asylum seekers. It's the majority of asylum applications are accepted in this country. It's only 12% in Spain. It's only 30% in France, and the majority of them get in this country. That's because of the Home Office doing all of this. You've also seen, of course, every attempt made by the last government and probably by this government to try to reform the immigration system comes up against the obstruction from the civil service itself. So we have no hope of reversing the long march through the institutions, no hope of tackling immigration, no hope of tackling radical Islam if we don't sort out the civil service, because they are actually hindering the mandates of the government.
It comes back to this word culture again, doesn't it? It's the culture in the Home Office, and it's not just the government, and it's not just the civil service. It's all the related aspects, the arm's length organisations, the quangos, the charities, all of these things that actually drive policy. It's these things that, again, I don't want to go on about the Conservative Party all the time, but the Conservative Party failed to tackle. And so the Labour Party, of course, will not tackle it because it's all of their people. And this is what we really need to deal with. So it's very good, actually, that this policy has been leaked and this report has been leaked, and we know about it because, again, it shines a light on this culture. And this is where we have to focus. This is what we have to deal with.
When do you remember first hearing that we're going to have a bonfire of the Quangos? Do you remember that saying?
Yes, I remember the saying.
I think Cameron said a bonfire of the
Never happened.
Never ever happened. For all these frustrations and everything, this might be the reason why apparently, Amy, more and more of our young people want a good old-fashioned dictator, isn't that right?
Yeah, so this is a statistic that has come out of Channel 4 and has been picked up by the Telegraph and various other news outlets, that 52% of Zoomers, which is the generation that is 13-year-olds to 27-year-olds currently, feel that Britain would benefit from a dictatorship. Apparently they want a young, kind of a strong man to come in and sort the country out. And I mean, I can understand their perspective, to be honest. I mean, it's well, indeed. I mean, it's surprising, isn't it? I mean, democracy seems to have gone out of fashion, which is, of course, the cornerstone of our country and of the West. And I grew up being told that, and being, we are pro-democracy, and that countries around the world that don't have democracy are near as good as ours. It feels very strange for me to know that younger people are now quite open to the idea that democracy isn't such a good thing. But you can understand why, in the fact that, the last 10 or 15 years, we've consistently voted, for lower immigration, and it's been ignored. There was efforts to thwart Brexit. People feel that their votes are just not heard, particularly working class people, that democracy just doesn't achieve anything. And in some ways, it's almost as though you end up with the worst of both worlds, because our country is feeling increasingly authoritarian, but there's no benefits. Nothing works. I mean, the joke is always that, under Mussolini, the trains at least ran on time. I mean,
we're getting a really weird area here.
Sorry, talk to me about trains, please.
But I mean, you can, I think there is a desire for things, when people can't buy a home and they can't, nothing works, the trains don't work, or whatever, people think, can someone just come in? And obviously it's a strange instinct. In fact, most of us, it's terrifying that people would be feeling that way. But it does show the level of desperation that young people in particular, who are, do not have much of a sense of a community, a sense of a future. Their education's probably been terrible, and nothing works, and they can't get on the housing ladder. You do understand why they would be thinking, look, anybody can just come in and at least sort something out.
Yeah. Don't you think, though, Rafe, that I automatically assume they want a kind of, not so much a Mussolini, but a Stalin figure? I mean, they would want someone from the left.
That's precisely it. So we've got the most authoritarian generation ever, as well as being the most liberal generation ever. Extreme liberalism combined with extreme authoritarianism.
Luxury communism, I think they call it.
And we do know from the polling that more than half of British youth would prefer Britain to be a socialistic state. Now, what does that mean? They don't explain. Like Denmark and Sweden, social democracy, I don't mind that so much. Or are they actually thinking full-scale socialism, in the communist way? It's deeply worrying stuff, and this is not just a British phenomenon. So there was, firstly, We've had polls like this actually for the last few years showing this tendency towards authoritarianism amongst the youth. But there was a global poll done last year which showed that half of the world thinks the same way. Not just the West, globally think this sort of way. Just as worrying was another poll I'd done in America when you had that young chap Mangione who murdered a CEO of an American medical company.
Yeah.
A plurality, more young people supported the murder than were appalled by it. You've got to the state now where basically it's back to the old, eat the rich era, where you get, because people don't, as you say, go through all the troubles that Amy has just outlined, people are now taking to extreme positions where they actually see murder as a justifiable means to essentially highlight the plight that they're suffering. Yeah. And a lot of it comes out of pure jealousy and envy as well, of course. I think these things are deeply worrying. Also fascinating and very worrying is the gender divide, where of course you have young men tend to now think have much more strident views than females on certain political issues. Women far more woke, men far less so. More men in this country under 44 would vote for Trump than would vote for Farage. Almost half of British male youth believe that women's rights have gone far enough and shouldn't go any further. And about the same number believe that they are being discriminated against now because of all of this. And so we're getting to a very fractured and a very disturbing period in the future. Where is this going to end, I just wonder, within another generation or two?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not only the young people as well, because this study showed the next generation, I think, for people in the 30s up to about 45.
What would they be called now?
Millennials.
Millennials.
Yeah. But 33% of those people also wanted a dictatorship. Now, those very definitely, they do not want a right-wing dictator. They definitely want Soviet Russia, And again, they are the people that age. They do not remember the difficulties, or it wasn't anywhere near their orbit, the difficulties this country faced in the 70s when we did have socialist governments, and they absolutely brought the country to its knees. And again, this feeds into other narratives as well. There's something else. I think it relates to our history and our past, especially around the Second World War. We fought authoritarianism, we fought Nazis, and all of that narrative is beginning to be fiddled with. We can maybe talk about that later for the members, but it's beginning to change, and that history is being rewritten, and the idea that we were good because we were fighting for freedom and we were fighting against totalitarianism is being messed around with, and that's incredibly worrying. And it's very worrying that it's coming from older people as well.
Do you know, well, we did a report on in the year 2017, so quite some time ago. It was the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. What do young people know about communism? Do you know that 70% did not know who Chairman Mao was?
Doesn't surprise me.
70%. And they also thought, most people thought that people like Tony Blair, who was quite strong in their memory then, people like Tony Blair were a greater threat to humanity than, Pol Pot, or someone like this. When you look at you mentioned their authoritarianism, there was a particular part of this survey which showed, I think, young people, for example, absolutely not drinking anything like as much as the likes of us, right? Now you might say, well, what's that got to do with it? But it's, to me, as you say, it's part of a kind of authoritarian mindset, actually. It's sort of, they're not going in for this stuff anymore.
Hitler was a vegetarian, never forget.
I was about to say, exactly, and there is that kind of thing going on. But, I mean, I think, basically, what does this mean for our political parties? I mean, presumably they're not looking, you mentioned reform or young men voting for Trump or whatever, but what does it mean for them? I mean, presumably none of these people will be seen as being strong. If they want someone like a strong figure, why don't they all go and vote for Tommy Robinson? I mean, I'm just suggesting. What is the Why would they not do that? So,
Well, it seems as though they're desperate for a leader. I think it's something that we just haven't had for a long time. It feels like all our politicians are managers.
Yeah,
They're a managerial class
yeah.
that we know when they say something, they've worked out exactly what they're supposed to say. They're trying to, play the media. They're trying to get away with certain things. There's never a sense of somebody just speaking, honestly and openly. Keir Starmer leads. Well, he doesn't lead. He's a lawyer, isn't he? He says the lawyerly thing. Kimmy Badenoch's made that remark, but then I would say the same as her. I don't necessarily feel that she's leading. And people do want something where they feel people, yes, they get it. This person understands, and I will follow them because, I can see there's something in this person. But our political class, I couldn't see anyone. It's very rare. You could maybe name like one or two people that you think they could really lead a party. And it used to be, it wasn't like that long ago. There would be real strong, lots of candidates where you could say, yes, he or she has got leadership qualities. But now it's so absent from our political class.
exactly. When you look at the Republican government, it's full of people who are very plausible options, aren't they? I can think of three already.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, by the way, to end on a brighter note, we were talking, I think, last week about the opposition to Trump, people not liking Trump. It does appear, though, that they like his policies, according to this one survey. Isn't that right? 58%, 56%, 52% for all his particular, immigration policies, the trans policy.
Yeah, people have been indoctrinated into not liking Trump, for years and years and years. But I think that's changing because he's coming across as a very different person. But the policies are crystal clear. They're straightforward. They say something. And I think it relates to this idea of purposefulness as well. Many people lack purpose in their lives and they're desperately looking for something. They're not necessarily looking within themselves. They're looking for a proxy. But even so, it's still the same thing. They're looking for direction. They're looking for purpose. And if they can see them in these policies, then yes, of course, they'll vote for them. But as you say, our major parties are nowhere on this.
Well, look, we're going to carry on a little bit, speaking for our members, exclusive content for our members. Don't forget to subscribe, as I said at the beginning. But in the meantime, Philip, thank you very much. Amy and Rafe, thanks very much indeed. We shall see you next week. Bye-bye. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.